Good afternoon, friends, and thank you very much for being here on especially hot Sunday afternoon. And I apologize that we've kept you from your near and dear on duty here. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce my colleague here, Mr. Gautam Bambawala, who's Joint Secretary is here, and has been the points person for our relations with China, among other countries of East Asia. What we will do today is just take you along the trajectory of discussions between the External Affairs Minister of India, Srimati Sushma Swaraj, and the Special Envoy of the President of China, Mr. Wang Yi, who also is the Foreign Minister of China. And at the end of my opening remarks, if you have any questions, we will be ready to answer them. The ground rules are the same. That means one question per person. So choose your question correctly. Okay, let me start. Well, the External Affairs Minister has just completed more than 3 hours of discussions with her Chinese counterpart, Mr. Wang Yi. Mr. Wang Yi is here as the Special Envoy of the Chinese President, President Xi Jinping. These talks, as you are aware, come in the wake of a telephonic conversation between Prime Minister and Prime Minister Li Keqiang. This was the first telephonic conversation that Prime Minister had with a foreign head of state after he took over office, which means that during the course of about a fortnight, this is the second interaction that we are having with China. And it gives you a flavor of the intensity of contacts between India and China. Now, regarding the talks today, if I were to try and encapsulate for you, we could say that the talks were cordial, useful, productive, and substantive. Now, I will try and take you through each of these specific adjectives that I've used and explain why. Let's start with cordial. The talks, as you're aware, covered virtually everything in terms of comprehensiveness and the length. So both in terms of length and breadth, these talks covered the entire expanse of our relationship, as well as other matters which countries like India and China, major countries in the region, can discuss. Now, Foreign Minister Wang Yi was effusive in his praise for the new government, and he said that the new Indian government had injected new vitality into an ancient civilization. He said that the international community was closely following developments in India, and China too was eager to engage. He said the Chinese and Indian dreams have a lot of commonalities. And then he went on to add that China welcomes the development of India, China supports the development of India, and China is ready to engage with the new government of India. And now this gives you an understanding of the atmospherics. Now, why did we say that they were useful? They were useful because within the first fortnight, there was an expansive engagement between the Indian External Affairs Minister and her Chinese counterpart over the entire expanse of our relationship. There was a discussion of the possible opportunities of engagement during the course of the year. In a sense, they worked out what we could say a possible schedule, a calendar of scheduled possible interactions during the rest of the year. These included possible meetings at a bilateral level, at a multilateral level, in plurilateral meetings that both leaders from both countries are likely to participate. Obviously, this is just the start of that process of engagement. So these are some initial thoughts that both the foreign ministers shared. And I don't want to get into the specific details at this stage because between now and the end of the year, perhaps for your purposes, I could try and summarize that there exist possibilities of at least half a dozen meetings between our senior leadership and the Chinese senior leadership. And by senior leadership, I mean the President of India, the Vice President of India, the Prime Minister of India, and for purposes of foreign policy, the External Affairs Minister of India. So that's likely to be the intensity of the engagement between our two countries. Now, having said that, in terms of, that's why we found this talks very useful, because we were setting an agenda for bilateral engagement over the next 6 months or so. We then felt that the discussions were comprehensive and substantive. Now let me try and explain why we think that it was comprehensive, why we think that they were substantive. Now, China is a neighbor with whom we share a long border. Our neighborhood, as you are aware, is a primary focus of our new government. China is also a major economy, and our bilateral ties are of a significant magnitude in terms of economic relations. The perennials of India-China engagement are well known to you, and so I will not get into them in a detailed manner, but would like to say quite clearly and candidly to you that all issues of significance were raised and discussed in a frank and cordial manner. Even while there was a determination to add new content and substance to the relations, there was an understanding that respect for sensitivities and aspirations of each other was essential for expansion of bilateral relations. There was also a fairly long and detailed discussion on economic issues. These discussions included specific projects, the trajectory of economic ties, potential for tapping opportunities, as well as issues that may impede the speeding up of the intensity of economic ties. Both the leaders felt that the potential for growth of economic ties, there was a tremendous untapped potential for the growth of economic ties. Finally, there was also a discussion on matters relating to people-to-people relations and people-to-people exchanges. In this context, issues relating to the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and the project about the Encyclopedia of India-China cultural ties were also discussed. Now, when foreign ministers of two important countries like India and China meet, they also discuss, apart from bilateral relations, other relations, other aspects of international relations which both are interested in. And therefore, there was a discussion on matters of regional and international importance to both our countries. Now, if I was to try and summarize at the end of all this, after having explained to you why we felt what we have already told you, we would think that given the range of issues as well as the cordial atmosphere in which these were being discussed, in our view, this is productive of India and the Chinese government. As the Chinese saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And that step was today taken by the new government of India and the Chinese government. I think I have tried to lay out for you in broad perspective what are the issues. I'm sure before I open the floor, I'd like to warn you that please do not expect us to be flies on the wall and try and give you a ball-by-ball commentary. I do understand that all of you have been kept away from the we've been away from your gaze, but we can't be flies on the wall, because if we were, we would have been swatted. So the floor is now open for any questions that you may ask in the context of what I've said to you. Yes, one by one. Vijay?
Mr. Wangi has given an interview before he came to India to Hindu, in which he said that there is going to be deeper engagement with India so far as counter-terrorism is concerned, and the mechanism is likely to be there. I just wanted to know whether there is a possibility of that mechanism, like joint working group with China on counter-terrorism. Was it discussed?
Well, I can say that this matter did come up, but I'll ask Gautam if there is any additional information that he'd like to add.
I think you already know that we do have a joint working group between India and China which discusses this subject of counterterrorism, and it meets very regularly from time to time. So, we do discuss counterterrorism with China. I can also add that Foreign Minister Wang, in his capacity as special representative of the President of China, appreciated the position of India on some of the recent terrorist incidents which have taken place in China.
Akhilesh Suman.
So, one of the major sensitivity of India is UN Security Council membership, permanent membership, and China has been off and on try to avoid the issue addressing directly. Was this issue addressed in this meeting, and whether the Foreign Minister of China could commit anything to the External Affairs Minister?
This was largely a meeting on the expanse of our bilateral relations. You are all aware of what are the major issues in our bilateral relationship, and those were the issues addressed. Now, if your question is, was everything under the sun discussed? No. The answer is because you need to take it in a calibrated manner. This is the first, I just mentioned, it's the first step. And there will be opportunities to discuss every issue in much more great detail, but we feel very happy that this was a very good beginning that was made in terms of engagement. Yes, Deepanjan?
I believe that the Chinese side was a bit unhappy before the meeting about the presence of the Tibetan Prime Minister in exile during the swearing-in ceremony. Did this issue, along with the presence of the Taiwanese representative at the swearing-in ceremony, come up today?
If your specific question is relating to a specific story that you are going about, my answer to that is no. Yes.
I just want to know whether the nuclear issues have crept into the India-China bilateral engagement.
What issues?
Nuclear issues have crept into the India-China bilateral issues because China had not been recognizing us as a nuclear power.
I had indicated to you that both the countries, when they meet, they also discuss issues of international importance. And nuclear certainly is an issue of international importance, and I don't need to say whether it was discussed, because I said all issues of international importance to India and China were discussed. So you can take it from there. I'm certain you can understand what it is. Yes, Aanchal?
So the trade deficit, could you give us some details of what was discussed, and also border disputes? If we could get some, it was discussed, but what was discussed? Whatever you can share at this moment.
Well, what I can tell you is that as Joint Secretary External Publicity mentioned, economic issues were discussed in great detail. And I must say that Foreign Minister, our External Affairs Minister, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, did talk about Chinese investment into India and how to promote Chinese investment into India, including through possible industrial zones or industrial parks that could be established here. And Foreign Minister Wang Yi also said that economic development is something which China supports. The economic development of India is something that is supported by the Chinese government. It is good for the world and it is good for China, and that they would look at possibilities of expanding economic cooperation between our two countries.
As regards yes, I'm answering it. As regards your other question, I think clearly said the perennials of India-China engagement were discussed comprehensively. All of you are aware what these perennials are, and what you are saying is one of the perennials of India-China relations. Yes. Ranjana?
Sir, the Tibetan groups have written to the PM requesting that the Tibetan issue be raised. So was it one of the topics that came up?
Again, I think rather than going into a step-by-step account, I did indicate that all issues of a perennial nature, which are issues between India and China, were discussed in a very cordial atmosphere. I will not get into which was raised, which was not raised. It's for you to make that judgment and take a call of what you consider are, when there's a comprehensive engagement across all issues, what was discussed and what is not discussed will not be indicated, but it is certainly indicated that this was a comprehensive discussion. Yes.
Well, we do learn that staple visas issue was raised. Given that it's been a consistent thorn in the relationship, we even seen military exchanges being called off because of that. What really is the tone of India when you raise this issue? Has there ever been any assurance from Chinese side, or what's their explanation really for going ahead with the staple visa policy every now and then?
First of all, I will not get into a speculative answer to a speculative question that you know about it. I leave it to you to know. I did not answer. I will not get into that answer. Please let me, I've given you your chance to ask, and let me give you my response. As far as we were concerned, all issues of significance were raised, and they were discussed in a cordial manner. Now, if your response is what, or to each of these issues, what was the response of our interlocutors, I think we are not the right people to respond to what our interlocutors say, because it would be trying to paraphrase a view that they would like to articulate. What we can articulate is an Indian position on this. And the Indian position is very clearly laid out, that all issues of a perennial nature were raised as part of our comprehensive discussion with the Chinese foreign minister today. External affairs minister was very candid and forthright in raising all sorts of issues. And this was understood very clearly and by our interlocutors on the other side. Yes, just 1 minute. Yes, Gautam?
Sir, you have said about the possible future engagements of both the leaderships. Now, in this context, I would like to ask that I believe the Chinese government had requested India government to represent at the 60-year celebration of Ponsil agreement. Whether India in principle has agreed to send somebody from India?
What I can confirm to you is that we are looking at several engagements. Those engagements span between now and end of the year. These are for bilateral nature, a plurilateral nature, and a multilateral nature. Now, I cannot get into the details unless these engagements are finalized. This was, as I said, the first step of that engagements. We've just begun this discussion. There are going to be bilateral engagements at senior level between our political leadership and the Chinese political leadership. There will be plurilateral engagements between the Indian leadership and the Chinese leadership, and there will also be substantive engagements on the margins of multilateral events. So please be certain there is an intensive engagement schedule that is being worked out. That schedule is not ready today, so I can't share those dates prematurely with you on any specific issue. Yes, just a minute. Yes, sir.
So does it mean that the Chinese side invited Mr. Modi to visit China, and also Xi Jinping to visit India?
Yes, this is a matter of public record. that Prime Minister Li Keqiang, when he had talked to Prime Minister Modi in their first telephonic conversation, had invited him to visit China. Also, it's a matter of public record that our Prime Minister had invited the Chinese President to visit India. And that's why I said that there are several intensive engagements that are being considered at this stage. I will not get into the details because this is just a meeting which completed a few hours ago. You would appreciate I can't get into the details because neither are dates decided on this, neither are events finalized on this, but there are invitations and prospects of meetings on a whole range of issues between several of our leaders and several of the Chinese leaders. Yes, Srinjoy.
Sir, when Mrs. Swaraj's predecessor had he had said on record that he did not raise the Depsang issue. Now today during this long discussion, was this issue of the border, particularly Depsang, raised in a way to ensure that this kind of thing never happened again? I don't mean Depsang directly also, but also future Depsang type intrusion.
Srinjoy, I will not get into a one-to-one discussion on the specifics of any issue. However, I suggest you please read some of my opening remarks. The External Affairs Minister has provided a clear articulation of the Indian view on a comprehensive range of issues. Nothing of importance that is of a perennial nature was missed out. Yes, Geeta.
In terms of the region, Akbar, what is it that was discussed with regards to Pakistan, and also did China raise concerns regarding South China Sea and India's dealings in that region?
When India and China meet, it is as two major countries which have interests beyond their boundaries. You are aware of what are our interests beyond our boundaries, as well as in relation with some of our neighbors. I will therefore not get into the specific answer, a specific question on a specific subject. However, I can assure you again, and let me repeat this, I suggest please have a look. How many times do I have to say it was comprehensive? All issues of a perennial nature were discussed. All issues of importance to India and China were discussed. You are all intelligent people who are aware of what are the issues of interest to both China and to India, and you will draw the necessary conclusions. But please, I request you not to adopt a fly on the wall approach, because this way you're not going to get anywhere. What you need to see, sit back and see, was this the first meeting? How did the engagement go? Was it comprehensive? Was it substantive? Was it productive? What does it lead to? In terms of the nitty-gritty, you can say, well, was this discussed? How long? What is discussed? We can go down that route, but it's not our intention to go down that route. Our intention is to give you an understanding of the tone, tenor, and trajectory of the discussions. And let me repeat, the tone, tenor, and trajectory of the discussions were that they were cordial, they were useful, they were productive, and they were substantive. Just 1 minute, Jayant. Jayant, I think India's policy was foreign policy is a foreign policy of the nation. Yes, next, Amrita.
I'm not going to ask you for any details which you can't share, but just a quick question on: is there a reason there wasn't a joint statement, or is it too premature?
Which one?
A joint statement between both sides?
No, there were no plans to have a joint statement. He is coming as a special envoy of the President of China. Therefore, he will meet our leadership. That means he would meet the Prime Minister tomorrow and the President. This was, since he is here, we utilized the opportunity to have the first substantive engagement at the foreign ministers level. This is not only a visit of or talking between two foreign ministers, because Foreign Minister Wang comes here as the special envoy of the Chinese president. Yes, just 1 minute.
Could it be possible to the Chinese investment in the particular sector, telecom sector, or it is automobile sector, or any other sectors?
No, I can just confirm to you that possibility of Chinese firms investing in India was discussed by the two foreign ministers.
And what did you want? You want to know the details? Sector, I mean the discussion or the specific investments?
What I asked is there any discussion in the particular sector, or it is a discussion in the general discussion?
No, they also discuss specific sectors.
So what sector?
Yes. No. Okay, I understand your interest in going down that route. At this stage, we've told you we will give you a again, let me repeat. We are willing to give you an understanding of the trajectory, the tone, the tenor of the discussion, not the details. We are not conducting public diplomacy lectures here. We are conducting foreign policy of a country. So please understand, while we can share with you the atmospherics, the major issues we've indicated to you, etc., we can't get into the nitty-gritty of a meeting which has just been completed, this first important engagement between India and an important neighbor. Yes, Parul.
Did this SR mechanism, was this issue discussed? Will the same format continue, and any dates that were discussed for their next meeting?
I think I answered a question saying that India's foreign policy is the foreign policy of the country. As regards the specific dates, etc., those were not discussed. But if your argument is about mechanisms in place, these are arrangements between two countries. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Sir, if you would like to share some details regarding to Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, what kind of facilities now they are going to provide us?
Sure.
No, I can tell you that this topic was touched upon by our External Affairs Minister, and she did ask for possibilities of additional routes to Kailash and Mansarovar. She did talk about the possibility of increasing the number of pilgrims who can go on the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra organized by the Ministry of External Affairs. And these were very general ideas which were discussed. There were no details at this point of time. She also thanked the Chinese foreign minister for having kept the cost of the yatra on the Chinese side constant for the last couple of years. So these were some of the points on Kailash Yatra which were discussed by our foreign minister with Chinese foreign minister.
Well, if nobody else has any questions, thank you very much. Oh, yes, just 1 minute. Yes.
I want to know a little more detail about the technological parks.
Pardon?
The parks that you talked about. Is there a plan for a quid pro quo?
Quid pro quo.
Or is it just India giving that to China?
Pardon? Industrial park.
No, the question of investment is Chinese investment into India and also possible Indian investment into China. But the details of parks, etc., have to be handled by other parts of the government of India. So that will happen in the coming weeks and coming months.
How will India expect China to correct the trade imbalance? That wasn't answered.
No, I think you know that one of the ways to correct a trade imbalance is for that country to invest in India. And that's the answer.
Yes, last question. Just a minute. Please, he'll get the mic.
So this is not on China, but some 78 fishermen have been arrested by Sri Lankan Tamil Nadu. So it's a huge issue. What is it? Has there been any talk on this?
Well, I will give you the last question and I will answer that. Even while the External Affairs Minister was in contact with her Chinese counterpart, she has instructed our embassy, our High Commission in Colombo to actively pursue this. Our High Commission right now is taking this up with the Sri Lankan authorities. That's the latest update that I have for you on this. Thank you very much.